Greetings. This is a quick review video about what we've learned this semester about market economics. We're going to just kind of go through it quickly, and it's hopefully going to set us up to learn about something new that kind of builds off of what we've been learning this semester about market economics. So to go back to the very definition of market economics involve a situation where you have a buyer and a seller, and they're going to communicate with each other until eventually they reach an agreement on the prices of products being sold by sellers to buyers. And this system is going to set prices. It's going to determine what is sold, where it's sold, how often it's sold. It's going to basically make all of the major decisions within an economy. Once an economy adopts the market system, that's going to probably be the most dominant force in making economic decisions within that economy. So, to sort of apply that principle to a few situations, what happens when you have only one buyer and many sellers? Well, what's going to happen is that the one buyer is going to get to make the decision. This is because sellers only have two options. They can agree with the buyer and accept his price, or they cannot agree with the buyer and then they do not sell the goods. So, in a world where you have many buyers and many sellers, if a buyer does not agree, the buyer does not buy, and the seller just sells to other buyers. The seller has other options. But when you're stuck with only one option of people to buy your goods, you have to basically accommodate that person. You have to sell them goods for whatever they say they are going to pay for it. So you have no competition among your buyers to buy your good. So you can't sell your goods for very much. That's the situation. So an example of this that I think we talked about earlier in the semester would perhaps be Boeing. And Boeing produces a lot of goods that are designed specifically for the U.S. military. They only have one potential buyer of those goods, although there are lots of different people that could produce those particular goods. There are a lot of companies that could potentially be producing that military equipment. So if Boeing isn't willing to sell to the government for the price that the U.S. government wants to pay for those goods, then the U.S. government can go to another seller, because there are many sellers, but Boeing cannot go to another buyer because there's only one buyer. So it really restricts the sellers in this situation. What about the opposite situation? What about when you have one seller but many buyers? Well, it's kind of the same thing but reversed. So you have many buyers, one seller. The many buyers can either agree with the seller and they can buy the good for whatever the seller is selling it for, or they cannot buy the good. And those are their only options. They cannot potentially get that good from someone else, because this is a situation where you only have one seller. Some of you may be familiar with the term monopoly. This is basically a monopoly. This is how a monopoly works. If you only have one person selling the good, then they can dictate prices. And if you can't afford that price, then tough, you can't get the good. You can't find someone else to sell it to you for cheaper. So that's going to allow companies, I should say, to keep prices much higher when they don't have any competition, when there are not other sellers. So those are two examples of when you're in an extreme situation with only one buyer or one seller and how it affects things. So taking this back to the definition of a market economy, an economy where you have a buyer and a seller reaching an agreement on prices and products, we need to consider a new situation. What if market economics involved a seller and a seller reaching an agreement on prices and products? Okay, so instead of a buyer and a seller reaching an agreement, we now have a seller and a seller reaching an agreement on prices of products. What are the seller and the other seller of the same product going to decide? What is this business relationship going to look like? What effects is it going to have on the market and on their buyers when sellers are going to all agree on prices of products. I want you guys to turn to your shoulder partners and to talk about this for about a minute, and then we're going to discuss it whole class. Talk to you again soon.